Is everybody going to be more or less ready to go at 2:30? This is the 2-minute warning, if so.
Yes, Chair Hart, you should be good to go.
Okay, thanks, Max, for taking care of everything. Even if it was, late inventory, it was better late than never. So thanks for that. I know you guys are working hard on fixing it up.
You should be good to go. Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks, Max, for. Are we missing anyone?
Don't see Commissioner Bob on here.
One last sound check from me. I just want to be sure.
5 by 5.
That's much better.
Thank you.
Much better.
Is everybody ready? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hereby call this remote meeting of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Mr. Smith, do we have a quorum today?
Yes, Chair Hart, you're in attendance. Secretary Treasurer for our dike is in attendance. Commissioner Rush is in attendance. Commissioner Lobby and Commissioner Alcative are all in attendance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. We will start today with our safety message from the WMSC's Emergency Management Specialist, Richard David. Mr. David?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Winter is coming. Service your furnace, clean your vents and chimneys. Be sure to check your smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. Do not overload electrical service circuits with space heaters or holiday decorations, and blow out any candles before you leave a room or go to sleep. You can also improve your safety by following: close before you doze. Close the doors to each bedroom. This reduces your exposure to smoke and slows the spread of fire if one occurs. Stay informed, stay healthy, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. We will now move on to the minutes from our previous meeting. Secretary Treasurer for our dike, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes of September 20th, 2022 meeting were posted for your review. Are there any additional corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I move approval of the September 20th minutes as circulated. Is there a second? Commissioner Rush has seconded the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
Yeah.
Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Commissioner, the vote is 5-0 and the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Ms. Farardike. Next on our agenda, we will provide an opportunity for public comments as we do at each of our meetings. And we will now ask if any members of the public who have joined our Zoom webinar would like to speak. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom and our staff will unmute one person at a time. Each person will have a maximum of 2 minutes. I will pause now to see if we have any public comments. While we're waiting, I will remind everybody, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any concerns, especially safety concerns, through our website, WMSC.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. Mr. Smith, do we have anyone who has indicated they would like to speak today?
No, Chair Hart.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. We will now continue with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities, including the status of Metro Rail's response to our order related to the 7000 series rail cars, a report about our safety certification approval for Metro Rail to begin service on Silver Line Phase 2, and other actions that we are taking to ensure that Metro Rail continuously improves the safety of its system. We will also consider Metro Rail's proposed revision to its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTASP. PTASP. This is the high-level document that lays out Metro Rail's safety commitments, including the commitment to implement a safety management system. WMSC staff will provide further updates as part of this meeting. Regarding the Silver Line, today Metro Rail began operating the first trains and revenue passenger service on Silver Line Phase 2 between Wiley-Reston East and Ashburn stations. I'm proud of the hard work by the WMSC staff members for more than 3 years to oversee Metro Rail's safety certification process. This includes the WMSC staff's continued data and document-driven approach to ensure that Metro Rail carried out the necessary safety measures to address identified hazards. It is Metro Rail following and continuously improving its properly approved processes and procedures that ensures that WMATA will operate the system as safely as reasonably practicable. The WMSC has played an important role in ensuring that Metro Rail completed its safety certification process so that the Silver Line Phase 2 could open today. We look forward to the positive impact that this project will have on the region, and I congratulate the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority and Metro Rail on reaching this stage where they could begin passenger service. Reaching this milestone took years of hard work, and I congratulate all those individuals, organizations, and leaders that have played a role in it. Changing to another topic, I would also like to take a moment to thank Greg Hull for his distinguished service as a WMSC commissioner selected by the Commonwealth of Virginia. Mr. Hull has resigned from the WMSC. We very much appreciate his service in helping to establish the WMSC and his leadership in our continuing efforts to drive Metro Rail to improve safety, including his service as vice chair of the board for the past 4 years. Later in this meeting, we will consider electing a new vice chair. We are fortunate to have alternate Commissioner Laube also selected by the Commonwealth of Virginia as part of our commission as well, and he will be eligible to vote on each item that comes before us today. One other note, Dr. Meyer unfortunately had an unexpected medical issue this weekend, and he asked me to share his disappointment that he could not participate in today's meeting, or that after his extensive involvement regarding the Silver Line, he was unable to attend this morning's Silver Line opening ceremony to congratulate the Airports Authority and Metro Rail on reaching this stage of their ongoing work. We look forward to having him back at work soon. Ms. Samarasinha, in Dr. Meyer's absence, do you have any opening remarks for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair Hart. I do. As you noted, Dr. Meyer expressed his disappointment at being unable to participate in today's meeting or to attend this morning's Silver Line opening ceremony to congratulate both the Airports Authority and Metro Rail on reaching this stage of their ongoing work. We are glad he's doing well and look forward to having him back shortly. Our team always works hard and around the clock, but that has been especially true over the last month. Metro Rail finally returned to a data-driven and iterative 7000 series return to service plan development process after Metro Rail placed public and political pressure on itself in mid-October. Last week, Metro Rail completed its Silver Line Phase 2 safety certification activities necessary for the safe opening of the extension. Metro Rail set that date for today. I cannot thank our staff enough for the long hours and detailed, dedicated work they have put in on behalf of everyone across our region to carry out our important safety oversight work that increases the safety of Metro Rail riders, workers, and first responders. Regarding Metro Rail 7000 series return to service plan revisions, the WMSC continues to follow a data-driven approach as specified in our December 29th order. We also continue to emphasize to Metro Rail WMATA's own commitments in its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTASP, and the safety management system laid out in that plan to utilize data to mitigate known hazards and risks. Although it is disappointing that Metrorail initially opted to again make misleading and false statements to the public and government officials rather than working constructively with the WMSC, I am glad that Metrorail eventually did return to an iterative plan development process based on the data, as we had again highlighted in our letter to Metrorail on October 17th. This allowed Metrorail to develop a return to service plan revision submitted on October 25th that aligned with the available safety data. We provided our no technical objections that same day. The mitigations in the revised plan reflect that Metrorail had essentially not run cars with low press signage axles that do not meet WMATA's current specifications since May of this year. That Metrorail has documented wheel migration on more than 80 7000 series axles since 2017, that Metrorail had been running 7000 series trains on specific lines since May of this year, and that the ongoing investigation continues to suggest that there are multiple contributing factors to this wheel migration on the 7000 series rail cars, including factors that could differ across the Metrorail system. We continue to oversee Metrorail's implementation of its return to service plan. Any adjustments Metrorail develops to reference processes and procedures, including to mitigate identified process failures, are overseen as specified in our December 29th order. Recent process failures where Metrorail has not adhered to its processes have included Metrorail on September 22nd placing a train into passenger service with 6 of 8 cars that did not meet the safety requirements of its return to service plan, and Metrorail then keeping the train in passenger service after the safety issue was identified. The train was put into passenger service at 6:10 a.m. and was not removed from passenger service until 7:35 a.m. that same day. Metrorail had not generated a work order to inspect these rail cars, and Metrorail involved personnel in the process who were not trained on the necessary roles and responsibilities. Metrorail has distributed a memoranda and adjusted IT systems as immediate mitigations. In another example, on November 3rd, an unintended release of rail cars into passenger service demonstrated gaps in Metrorail's general control of rail cars that have not been cleared for service. In this case, the cars were designated to be kept out of passenger service due to an HVAC problem, a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning problem, using the same system that Metrorail uses to keep cars out of service for items such as a lack of current back-to-back inspections. Metrorail had designated the cars as being for training use only. However, the cars were still put into passenger service. We also continue to monitor Metrorail's implementation of other parts of its return to service plan, such as the multidisciplinary vehicle track working group chartered under the September 2nd plan revision. Metrorail has the opportunity to utilize this group to help break down organizational silos and to make more effectively understand that rail transit relies on a system of systems, and the way those systems, such as rail cars and track, interact with each other may introduce or address safety issues even if each system on its own is within specified limits. In addition to our oversight of Metrorail's return to service plan, our team continues to participate in the NTSB derailment investigation. Regarding Silver Line Phase 2, we observed Metrorail's first Silver Line Phase 2 trains operating in passenger service just a few minutes ago. I would like to congratulate the Airports Authority and Metrorail on the start of passenger service. Metrorail set this opening date after we had this meeting scheduled, and I'm glad I could participate in both activities today. We have been overseeing Metrorail and Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority safety certification of this project since our oversight program certification more than 3 years ago. Metrorail has, of course, been working on this project much longer than that, including on its safety certification process, which is a critical element of Metrorail's safety management system. Consistently identifying hazards, and mitigating the likelihood and severity of those hazards in a systematic way, as documented in Metro Rail's policies and procedures, is what provides for the overall safety of the Metro Rail system. To achieve this, Metro Rail must actually carry out all elements of its safety requirements without bypassing any of this holistic safety process. Our work, conducted on an ongoing basis since 2019 to oversee Metro Rail's and MWA's Silver Line Phase 2 safety certification process, has included field observations, document and data review, and regular meetings with Metro Rail. I would particularly like to thank Mr. Sahu, our subject matter experts, and other members of our team for their dedication to this work. Our work identified hazards that Metro Rail has now mitigated, marking Silver Line Phase 2 safe for riders, workers, and first responders. Our work ensured that Metro Rail developed mitigations for hazards that it had identified, making Silver Line Phase 2 safer for riders, workers, and first responders. Our work ensured that Metro Rail implemented mitigations to address hazards as required by its safety processes and procedures prior to opening the line, making Silver Line Phase 2 safer for riders, workers, and first responders. Because we clearly and quickly communicated any issues that we found, Metro Rail and MWA were able to address those safety issues that we identified in a timely fashion. Once Metro Rail completed the safety mitigations that Metro Rail had identified as required to mitigate known hazards to ensure the safety of riders, workers, and first responders, the WMSC provided Metro Rail with our concurrence last Thursday with Metro Rail's safety certification process. This occurred after our months and years of review and less than 24 hours after Metro Rail submitted the final documentation that these safety mitigations are in place. These mitigations include permanent long-term fixes as well as short-term temporary mitigations. We will continue to oversee Metro Rail's safety activities now that they have incorporated Silver Line Phase 2 into the adopted regional system. This work includes checking that Metro Rail continues to implement those temporary mitigations it has committed to until permanent mitigations are in place in the coming months. Now that Metro Rail has completed the mitigations and corrective actions needed to open the line, and Metro Rail set an opening date, opening the line to riders this afternoon, we look forward to the positive impact Silver Line Phase 2 will have for the region. I again congratulate Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority and Metro Rail for reaching this point. And I thank the Airports Authority for its hospitality today. We have, of course, also continued our other detailed safety oversight work throughout this busy period. For example, WMSC's independent oversight identified late this summer that Metro Rail Safety Department had granted the highest level of roadway worker protection qualifications, RWP Level 4, to individuals in the Safety Department's Office of Emergency Preparedness who do not and did not meet Metro Rail's written requirements for this qualification. The training and experience of individuals granted an RWP Level 4 qualification is particularly important because it permits an individual to act as a roadway worker in charge, the person responsible for the safety and protection of all other individuals in the work group. After the WMSC identified that Metro Rail was not following its safety processes, Metro Rail told the WMSC in September that a waiver had been issued this past winter. When the WMSC asked for a copy of that waiver, Metro Rail could not provide any such waiver. Still, Metro Rail had issued Level 4 qualifications to individuals who had not previously had experience as RWP qualified personnel. Due to the WMSC's oversight and further data requests and review, Metro Rail developed a draft permanent order that would provide specific mitigations required before specific personnel are permitted to obtain a Level 4 qualification without meeting Metrorail's usual requirements. The mitigations include ensuring, contrary to Metrorail's initial actions to require no prior RWP experience, these individuals have at least 6 months of experience with an RWP Level 2 qualification. Ensuring that these individuals observe a Level 4 qualified individual, lead at least 5 tunnel familiarization walks for jurisdictional first responders, and ensuring that these individuals perform advanced mobile flagger and watchman lookout duties with a written assessment of competence by their roadway worker in charge. The Level 4 qualification would only be granted after the training department confirms that these requirements are met. This is just one example of our safety oversight leading to safety improvements. In this case, that means ensuring that only trained and qualified Metrorail personnel are providing for the safety of first responders, such as firefighters and police officers, participating in familiarization walks along active Metrorail tracks with train movement. It is also an example of, due to the WMSC's review of documents and data, and in this case, our persistence, Metrorail addressing a safety issue identified by the WMSC without the need for the WMSC to issue an order requiring it. Metrorail Safety Management System, committed to by the Vermont Board and the General Manager in Vermont's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTAS, requires Metrorail to identify and address these issues. It should not take WMSC orders for Metrorail to follow its own procedures or to address known hazards. Of course, the WMSC will continue to take enforcement action if necessary. Moving to ongoing investigations, we are investigating a series of Metrorail station overruns, including 7 that occurred the weekend of November 4th, 5th, and 6th. Metrorail is on pace to have roughly a similar number of station overruns this year as occurred last year. These events pose risks such as the risk of collision. WMSC has raised this issue to Metrorail for several years, and Metrorail has placed its focus on creating definitions and procedures. This includes Metrorail limiting station entry speeds to no more than 40 miles per hour. 2 of the 7 overruns we are discussing now were over that speed. The other 5 were not. As an interim measure after these overruns, Metrorail further reduced speed commands entering specific stations. Investigations into each of these specific events are ongoing, including review of data and necessary interviews with Metrorail personnel. The investigations will consider contributing factors ranging from vehicle-track interaction and mechanical and systems conditions to human performance, such as train operator attention, alertness, and training. Metrorail is now gathering information on and considering adding safety practices used at other properties that may reduce the likelihood of these safety events. In addition to the causes of the safety overruns, we are also concerned that during the investigation, we identified that Metrorail was actively ignoring its documented procedures for required safety actions after a station overrun occurs. These are procedures Metrorail developed to mitigate the risk of harm to riders and workers from subsequent unsafe actions or events following a station overrun. This includes not effectively communicating procedural changes Metrorail determined were necessary to ensure the safety of passengers following prior station overrun and improper movement events. After the WMSC identified this non-compliance with Metrorail standards, senior Metrorail individuals stated that the specific safety procedure, SOP 40, was being deliberately ignored with their knowledge in contravention of Metrorail safety commitments. A Metrorail permanent order adopted by Metrorail's Rail Safety Standards Committee last month states the updated procedure took effect November 1st. The procedure requires that after a station overrun, the train continues to the next station at reduced speed and, as Metrorail has done in the past, that the train and train operator be removed from service. The train is removed and taken to a yard to determine whether any mechanical issue contributed to the safety event and to prevent the continued operation of that train with such a safety problem. The train operator is removed to ensure they are assessed and undergo drug and alcohol testing to ensure these possible contributing factors are assessed. Again, this was the procedure approved in October by Metrorail's Rail Safety Standards Committee that was in effect November 1st. The Rail Safety Standards Committee is coordinated by the Safety Department and includes representatives for rail operations departments. Senior Metrorail operations and safety individuals stated after these events where SOP 40 was not followed that the SOP was being paused. However, Metrorail's documentation and months of work the WMSC had monitored on updates to the procedure demonstrate that the SOP was in effect. The updates to the procedure that took effect November 1st were due to the corrective actions that Metrorail developed to address safety issues identified in investigations, including W163 adopted at your May 2022 public meeting relating to a station overrun and improper movement on the Green Line. Metrorail adopted this revised SOP with additional safety protections after months of careful work, specifically among the new additions to the procedure. Metrorail determined in the procedure that after a station overrun, trains should not service the station and should continue to the next station at restricted speed and then be offloaded. Metrorail did not do that for any of these station overruns. In response to the WMSC holding Metrorail to its own standards, individuals at Metrorail claimed that following the in effect SOP as specified by the permanent order that had been approved by multiple Metrorail managers could introduce confusion. Metrorail also claimed that the in effect SOP could be ignored without following Metrorail's documented safety processes required to ensure changes are made in a controlled manner. The WMSC is deeply concerned about Metrorail senior leadership's incorrect statements that a failure to follow procedures in place to control known hazards does not lead to unsafe conditions. These statements are expressly contrary to logic and sound safety practices, as well as more specifically, Metrorail's PTASP and the WMSC program standard. If controls in place to ensure the safety of passengers and workers are ignored, then those controls do not provide the intended level of safety for Metrorail passengers and employees. Yesterday, after the WMSC had raised these safety issues, Metrorail provided a document dated November 10th that stated a different new station overrun procedure was in effect that had not been considered and acted on by its Rail Safety Standards Committee. This included an element that also appears to contradict Metrorail's safety event investigation procedure SOP 800-01, which requires equipment involved in safety events to be removed from service to ensure that a vehicle's safety problem is not allowed to contribute to a second safety event. Additionally, Metrorail informed the WMSC that it is further reviewing this week the SOP that the permanent order had put in effect November 1st. The WMSC is continuing to gather information from Metrorail regarding the actions in this case outside of Metrorail's documented safety processes. We will determine whether any further WMSC actions are necessary. As always, the WMSC endeavors to work with WMATA to ensure that Metrorail provides a system that is as safe as reasonably practicable for the public, the employees, contractors, and first responders. The WMSC is also examining Metrorail's response to reports of smoke at Courthouse Station on November 7th and at Shaw Howard University Station on November 10th, 2022. We are gathering information regarding the exact timing of various events, conversations, and actions to ensure that any conclusions we draw or actions we take are based on available safety information. The WMSC has also taken note of Metrorail's public statement regarding the November 7th event, preemptively describing the decision to send trains into an area with reported smoke as sound, even though the investigation has not reached this conclusion. We are mindful of Metro Rail's history in this area and Metro Rail's past promises to place safety over service. For your information, Metro Rail reported the November 7th event to the WMSC, but did not initially report this event to the FDA as required until the WMSC reminded Metro Rail of the need to do so due to the evacuation for life safety reasons. The WMSC continues to review and gather information to determine what, if any, actions may be required in addition to the investigation reports that will be presented at a future meeting. Regarding some of our other recent activities, for your awareness, as required by the infrastructure law enacted last year, the Federal Transit Administration issued special directives to each state safety oversight agency on October 21st related to risk-based inspection programs. We have already been preparing to build this program in accordance with the law, building on our existing activities. We are keeping Metro Rail informed on this topic and will have additional discussions as needed. We will demonstrate our inspections program meets the requirements before the October 2024 deadline. In advance of this special directive, we had prepared adjustments within our organization to create the position of a risk-based inspections program manager. I am pleased to share that John DiRenzo has accepted a promotion to this position. John has been integral to our work, particularly as it relates to the 7000 series return to service and the derailment investigation, and brings a wide range of experience to this role. The FDA also issued 2 safety advisories last month. We have shared the information from those advisories with Metro Rail and have further discussions with Metro Rail about both the railcar passenger door inspection advisory and the signal system safety and train control advisory. These are 2 areas the WMSC has already done detailed work on since 2019. We most recently discussed with WMATA last week the schedules for Metro Rail responses on these items. Metro Rail has committed to responding to the signal system safety and train control advisory by April 2023. Metro Rail stated it is developing a response regarding the railcar passenger door inspection advisory. In addition, the FDA issued a special directive October 4th related to transit worker assault, which Metro Rail is required to address in its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. This directive includes a series of questions to Metro Rail regarding its actions related to transit worker assault. Metro Rail told the WMSC last week it expects to respond on time by December 3rd. The Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan revision before you later in this meeting includes the required items regarding this topic. Metro Rail is also assessing its use of portable derailers in response to an FRA safety advisory. More generally, WMSC staff members participated in the FDA's Joint State Safety Oversight and Rail Transit Agency workshop last month. This is another opportunity for WMSC personnel to learn from experiences of other SSOAs, as well as to hear updates directly from the FDA. WMSC personnel also met with other members of the Transit Safety Oversight Association, or TSOA, an independent entity being established to improve information sharing and interactions among state safety oversight agencies such as the WMSC. That concludes my remarks, Chair Hart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samarasinha. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Samarasinha?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
Very comprehensive report, but very disturbing in that there seems to be some backsliding on Metro's part as far as following procedures, issuing standard operating procedures without the safety committee involved. Are these types of activities allowed under the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan that we're getting ready to approve?
No, they are not. And that is exactly the part of the update that I provided just a few moments ago. There is a very methodical approach required generally of the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan that requires a change management and configured management of not only engineering changes, but process changes within Metro Rail. In addition to that, there is, as I also pointed out, a official Rail Safety Standards Committee in place, chartered to conduct this kind of change to procedure in a methodical manner. So conducting changes to procedures, like in this instance, outside of that process is dangerous, because the reason why there is a methodical approach is to ensure that all considerations are made and no unintended hazards are introduced as a result of unilaterally making changes without consulting with experts who are assembled within, say, for instance, here within the Rail Safety Standards Committee, who are better positioned to provide the insight and the expertise in order to make any changes to existing procedures, like what we were talking about.
So I know that we've talked throughout of the accidents and incidents, how many times failure to follow procedures, failure to follow the standard operating procedures have caused issues on responses to accidents or causal in the accidents themselves. Essentially, if Washington Metro does not basically change their tune and decide that they're going to follow the procedures and follow the procedures in place to come up with new standard operating procedures. If they're not going to do that, they're not in compliance with their own safety plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and what options does WMSC have when Washington Metro is not in compliance with their own safety plan, which they developed themselves and said, this is how we're going to manage safety on our property? What do we do when they don't follow their own plan?
And if I can refer back to the update that I provided, it's a tiered approach, Commissioner Lobby, in terms of presenting the information that we have as we understand it to be, getting WMATA to recognize the hazard posed by the safety information that we are providing them, getting them to address those in a proactive, open manner to ensure that recurrence of issues do not happen. When Metro Rail in their own recognizance does not make those changes, then we are compelled to issue findings and various other directives and orders, as you've seen in the past. However, as the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan requires of Metro, they are to use a proactive approach to utilizing lessons learned and industry best practices through encouraging interactive, open discussions with their employees and their experts to prevent the recurrence of safety issues. In this regard, it's the prevention of station overruns and taking countermeasures to avoid additional secondary events happening after a station overrun happens. And so we will continue to engage with Metro. We will continue to make sure that they will take on the mantle of addressing these issues proactively without us issuing orders or directives. But as you've seen in the past, when there is reason to, we will have to issue a finding or directive or order. But ideally, given the requirements of our program standard, given the regulation and overall industry best practice, it is incumbent on Metro to do this proactively and not stray outside of the commitments that they're making in their Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan.
So Metro should be identifying these issues and mitigating these issues and not really relying on WMSC to do that work for them, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so in a perfect world, they would find all these issues and we would never have to say anything about it, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to stay tuned and see how this works out. But I think it's very important that since Washington Metro has made a commitment on this Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, that has the signatures of all the executive vice presidents and the general manager, that they actually do what they said they were going to do and follow their plan. And hopefully the WMSC staff will be looking at this closely to make sure that they do what they said they were going to do. Thanks.
That is correct, and we will be. Thank you, Commissioner Lobby.
I would like to do a follow-up on that question. Thank you for that question, Commissioner Lau, because I was troubled enough to see the instances when they weren't complying with what they were supposed to, but what I was even more troubled when there were situations where they said, well, yeah, I know it says that, but that's not really the best way to do it, so I'm not going to do it. So I would add to Commissioner Lowry's question, what do we do when it's intentional non-compliance versus just, oops, I didn't know it, so I didn't comply?
Chair Hart, so even in this instance, this is one example of how we conduct our work. We provide the opportunity, when we present the information that we have learned, we provide the opportunity for Metro Rail to adjust themselves and align themselves with their own safety commitments. So even in this regard, we have presented them with the information that we know. We are giving them the opportunity to do this on their own cognizance to correct the issue. And as I pointed out earlier, if there is a need, we will be compelled to take action. But presently, we are hoping that they will conduct and revert back to conducting things within the confines of their processes and procedures that are documented.
And I suppose if they don't, then we just have to escalate our responses accordingly.
That is exactly right.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Marsinga? Okay, seeing none, we will now move on to a status update on orders related to the 7,000 series cars, putting them back on the tracks in a more fulsome fashion. Ms. Marsinga?
Thank you, Chair Hart. We continue to oversee Metro Rail's implementation of its return to service plan. On October 21st, after Metro Rail had placed public and political pressure on itself to create and submit a revised plan to a revised return to service plan to the WMSC that was supported by available safety data, Metro Rail returned to a more collaborative, iterative, and data-driven approach to potential revisions to its plan. This allowed us, after ensuring that the plan was based on the available data, to provide on October 25th our no technical objections to Metro Rail's revised plan as submitted that day. Metro Rail's plan and the submission of any revisions is required in accordance with the WMSC's December 29th order. We continue to carry out our work based on the available safety data and information. This ensured that our team could act quickly and accurately to communicate with Metro Rail and any other interested stakeholders and to provide any necessary feedback and later our notice of no technical objections. As I mentioned, the mitigations in the revised plan reflect currently known data, including that measurement exceedances related to wheel migration have been documented on more than 80 7,000 series axles since 2017. Other known data include that the trains in use from June through September were selected from a specific pool of cars, and Metro Rail had operated them only on the yellow, green, and then red lines. Metro Rail's data also demonstrated that the other 7,000 series rail cars had generally not been operated more than a handful of miles since May. The WMSC will continue to incorporate into these discussions and data reviews any information gleaned from our ongoing work related to the NTSB investigation into the October 12th derailment. We continue to get new information, data, and analysis on an ongoing basis. Available information continues to suggest there are multiple contributing factors to this wheel migration on the 7,000 series cars, including factors that could differ across the Metro Rail system. Metro Rail's October 25th plan revision includes 4-day inspection intervals. the introduction of some of those cars that Metrorail had effectively not used on mainline tracks for passenger service or non-passenger use since at least May, and controls on the introduction of those cars. These controls include ensuring that these cars are carefully monitored and are only introduced to areas where Metrorail has had the opportunity to implement safety mitigations identified during the use of the cars with axles that all meet Metrorail's current axle assembly specifications. The plan includes a continued commitment from Metrorail to utilize its vehicle and track working group established under the September 2nd plan to address known safety hazards and data. The October 25th plan for the first time includes future phases that, if supported by available data, would further expand the use of the cars with at least low tonnage axles to all lines, then later extend the inspection interval. Metrorail is also continuing adjustments that have been made to reference documents, training and inspection related systems and processes due to the WMSC's ongoing oversight. This includes the instances on August 9th, September 22nd, October 6th, and October 7th, where Metrorail did not follow its safety processes to ensure that only cars meeting Metrorail's safety requirements were placed into service. It also includes Metrorail's developing necessary processes to review and acting upon vehicle-track interaction data as specified in its plan, which we had identified Metrorail was not doing as it had committed to in the plan. As it has been, this return to service plan process is and was unrelated to our long-standing process for oversight of Metrorail Silver Line Phase 2 safety certification activities. Metrorail's September 2nd plan included more than 330 rail cars eligible for passenger service. The current plan revision expands that pool of cars even further. Under the September 2nd plan, Metrorail most commonly ran 11 to 14 7000 series trains in passenger service each day, and never approached the 20 trains per day that were permitted as part of the limitations designed to ensure that Metrorail's safety processes were sound and that there was a focus on carrying out those safety processes as designed. Since the October 25th plan revision, which maintains the same 4-day inspection cycle, Metrorail has chosen to operate just over 27,000 series trains in passenger service on several days. Thank you, Chair Hart. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners regarding the return to service plan? I have one that I'd like to ask based on my experience at the NTSB, and that is, it was a pretty rare event when the NTSB could not determine the probable cause, could not determine the reason that something went wrong. But it's my understanding that the reason this reintroduction plan is so complicated is precisely because we don't really know what has caused the migration of the wheels on the axles. And I'm just wondering, I don't know if you're the appropriate person to answer this or someone else who's closer to the NTSB's investigation, but I'm just wondering, how optimistic are we that the NTSB will ever find out why the wheels have been migrating on the axles?
Chair Hart, I can answer that with a few items, which is the NTSB investigation is still ongoing, and there continues to be efforts to hone in on an array of probable causes. So there is complete optimism that causes for wheel migration will be detected. However, as we have pointed out over the last year, since our orders on 7,000 series rail cars have been in place, there is information in terms of engineering studies, industry studies, research papers, all of which point to the ability to control the wheel migration while such probable causes are being determined by the NTSB investigation. So it is not that there is any hope lost in not being able to have a cause determined presently, because there is adequate information, adequate data, adequate research to allow Metrorail to take on controls, to ensure that wheel migration on axles of the 7000 series rail cars are mitigated presently while causes for the accident are determined. As we have pointed out, these controls run the gamut of not only rail car-borne controls, inspection practices, training, as well as track and vehicle interaction issues, as well as track issues, all of which can be used in order to control the issue presently, while the NTSB is working through the various parties to make a determination on the probable causes. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but while probable causes are being awaited, there is adequate information to act upon to control the issue presently.
Well, thank you, because I know the NTSB investigators are dogged investigators, and they do not like to go home without the answer. But we unfortunately, we may be facing the situation where it's like you go to the doctor and the doctor can't tell you what's wrong. That's the worst of all, because then you still have a problem, but you're not sure what to do about it because you don't know what the problem is. So I'm just hoping that we will be able to nail down with some more specificity what is the problem so that we can make sure we have solved it adequately and appropriately. Thank you. Any questions from any of the other commissioners from Ms. Samar Singh?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby.
I just wanted to dig into when you talk about control the problem. Essentially, are you saying that when you control the problem, you basically detect any wheel movement before it becomes a safety issue? Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're talking about?
I'm talking about figuring out how to prevent the wheel movement in the first place. I'm talking about knowing what went wrong so we would know what to do in order to keep it from happening again. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. But in the meantime, we try to control the problem, and
Sure.
we control it by trying to detect any movement of an axle before it becomes a safety issue, before it moves so much that
Correct.
it's a safety issue.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Lobby, I apologize if I misunderstood, but was there a question in there for me, or was there the discussion between you and Chair Hart?
That of how you define control the problem, because there's a lot of data, there's a lot of information here, but the bottom line is, how are you controlling the problem while NTSB does their work?
Metrorail is controlling the problem through an array of activities. One is to ensure that the measurement the measurement devices used in order to detect that the gauge of the wheel set is within tolerance, that the tool itself to be accurate. That's number one. Number two is to ensure that the individuals who are conducting the measurements, supervising those who are conducting the measurements, and conducting the quality control are all trained specifically for that activity and fully understand their roles and responsibilities and the precision that's required of them. Thirdly, there is the recognition that there are certain subsets of cars that were operated first, then making sure that the track department were detecting if there were any track anomalies as a result of these cars operating, for those anomalies to be corrected, and then the introduction of the lower tonnage cars into those same track areas within the system. And so that is what you heard us talking about a few minutes ago, about a metered gradual introduction of the subsets of cars into various parts of the system, while vigorously checking on the track infrastructure to see whether there are any new patterns or anomalous occurrences that are detected while these trains are interacting with those track sections as they are introduced gradually. So that those are the controls that are in place. And then, of course, there are procedural controls along with an aggressive focus on data that's produced over the course of every week, where Metrorail looks at the data produced in terms of track inspections, car maintenance measurements that are taken of the back-to-back inspections, vehicle track interaction data, VTI data, all of which are being looked at by Metro aggressively. And this is also what we pointed out in a few minutes ago about the need for Metro to take a holistic approach, utilizing this vehicle track expert group that they have assembled to attack the data in a way that takes into account that this is a system of systems. It's not a vehicle only evaluation. It's not a track only evaluation. It should be a collective understanding of what are the causes and how can those be controlled while waiting for a probable cause or causes to be determined. I hope that provides you with the answer for the question that you raised.
Yeah, I think that's great background. So we expect them to use these processes to ensure, you know, the safety of operating these train sets. And certainly this is an area where we want them to depart from their standard operating procedures.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Lobby. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Samar Sinha?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please, Commissioner Bob.
thank you. I'm just wondering, over the last several weeks, there's been a flurry of activities, all of which we were discussing by our staff. And I'm just wondering whether or not we are appropriately staffed for the level of activities we seem to be incurring. Or is that something we should consider at some point downstream? They seem to be, you know, there's been a lot of work on the part of our staff, and the extent to which this is going to continue. My question downstream is whether or not we should be looking at our staffing component going forward, if this level of activity is going to continue.
Ms. Samar Sinha, I'll defer that to you.
Thank you, Chair Hart. So as part of the work that we do, as part of our program standard, one of the things, Commissioner Bob, that we do is evaluate our workload in contrast with the capacity that we have in terms of the capacity of full-time employees that we have. This is at least a once a year activity, but it happens more often given the relatively newness of our organization. And so you have seen over the course, you've been with us for the last 4 years, you've seen the organization grow in terms of staffing, and that is directly because of the workload that we utilize to determine that we need additional capacity, additional bandwidth in staffing. And as you just heard, we have promoted John DiRenzo, who was a rail technical specialist who joined our organization last September. We have promoted him into the program manager for risk-based inspections with the recognition of two things. One is we are expanding that area of our work to meet the requirements that FDA has now issued as a special directive for risk-based inspections to be part of a state safety oversight agency's programs. And the other part is the recognition that there needs to be a higher focus on the activities pertaining to, for instance, verifying the work that is around the return to service plan activities. So that takes capacity, and once the effort reduces on that, the oversight work continues on other parts of the program. Just like Metro, the work is dynamic, and because everything is run by human beings and assets that have a life expectancy, the focus on oversight will shift from one to the other as time progresses, as things arise. So I thank you for recognizing the need to be ahead of the curve in terms of making sure that we have the necessary capacity to do the work. And I want to assure you that we do that routinely. We do evaluate the capacity and make additional changes in terms of recruitment when need arises. And that is an ongoing thing where we usually have recruitments ongoing throughout the year. And I hope I answered that question for you, Commissioner Bob.
Yes, thank you. It's just something that we should constantly evaluate as our workload seem to continue.
Yes, we absolutely do that. Yep.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Bob. Any other questions for Commissioner Samarasinghe? Okay, hearing none, we will now move on to our next item, which is audits. For that, we will get an update from Program Coordination Specialist, Ms. Ashley Rhodes. Ms. Rhodes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Since your last public meeting, we have transmitted the first 2 draft audits of our next triennial cycle to Metrorail. We transmitted the draft track audit to Metrorail on November 1st for Metrorail's technical review. Our track audit report includes an assessment of Metrorail's practices and of the permanence and effectiveness of corrective action plans Metrorail implemented as a result of the WMSC's previous track audit issued in 2020. Earlier today, we transmitted our draft audit of Metrorail's internal safety review program and associated corrective actions for Metrorail's technical review. Metrorail's internal safety reviews are required by the WMSC program standard and by federal regulation. They are designed to proactively identify safety deficiencies and to lead to corrective actions to address each deficiency. These reviews complement the WMSC's audits as they are generally conducted in between the WMSC's audits. As with each of our audits, the work on these audits included extensive reviews of Metrorail documents, on-site work such as interviews, and in the case of the track audit, site visits to various parts of the Metrorail system. Our audits assesses Metrorail against the relevant criteria such as the requirements of Metrorail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, requirements specified in other Metrorail documents such as SOPs and orders, and regulatory requirements. These audits cover all aspects of Metrorail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan over a 3-year period and are designed to proactively identify safety issues. We are now working on our structures audit. The team has been reviewing documents and data provided by Metrorail and is preparing for site visits and interviews in coming weeks. Our next audit after that will be of Metrorail's roadway maintenance machine program. The site visits and interviews for this audit will be done this winter. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Rhodes? How have you recovered from COVID in terms of the ability to visit on site as opposed to doing things remotely?
I'll defer to Sharmila before I answer that in case she has anything she'd like to say.
So Chair Hart, if I understand your question, you're asking how different we conduct our work during the post-COVID era. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Have we returned to the pre-COVID way of doing it, or are we still doing some things remotely that we didn't used to?
So we even during the COVID pandemic, when it was in the very throes of the pandemic, we conducted our work and made very judicious, selective activities that we conducted in person, recognizing that we needed to take additional precautions in the absence of the vaccine. However, since the last 2 years, since there has been more controls, more information about how to stay safe in line with staying safe from contracting COVID, we have increased our activities and we conduct our on-site activities that pertain to audits, on-site verification activities that pertain to corrective action plans, and we do that in person. So we are continuing to conduct our work as aggressively as possible, being mindful of the information that arises from, say, the health community or CDC in terms of any precautions we need to take while we are doing these things in person.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Marsinger or for Ms. Rhodes? Okay, seeing none, we will take up the next agenda item, which is also Ms. Rhodes, corrective action plan. Ms. Rhodes?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Since your last public meeting, we have closed 5 CAPs and have approved 4 Metro Rail CAP proposals for implementation. When Metro Rail develops corrective action plans to address the safety deficiencies identified by WMSC findings and recommendations, or other issues specified by the WMSC program standard, Metro Rail submits these plans to the WMSC for review and approval. Each CAP is a specific plan to address a safety deficiency. So the proactive identification of these deficiencies by the WMSC and later the resolution of these deficiencies by Metro Rail is part of the continuous safety improvement process. After Metro Rail submits acceptable CAP proposals that will address the safety deficiency, Metro Rail is responsible for implementing its corrective action plans on the schedule documented in the CAP. We conduct our audits and oversight activities on an ongoing basis. This has led to audits which, to this point, have each included findings being issued every few months. Corrective actions to address each finding typically take months or years to implement, as the CAPs are designed to systemically address issues identified by the finding. CAPs typically also include documentation of implementation prior to closure by the WMSC. The systemic nature of required fixes and the WMSC's detailed ongoing work means that the raw number of open CAPs may increase over time. The existence of CAPs demonstrates the ongoing work toward continuous improvement. Regarding the latest CAP proposal submitted by Metro Rail, we have now approved all 13 of Metro Rail station maintenance, elevator, and escalator audit CAPs for implementation. We just completed our review yesterday of Metro Rail's first batch of CAP proposals to address the findings and recommendations from the communications audit issued in September. The WMSC approved 2 CAP proposals for implementation and provided feedback to Metro Rail on 7 other proposed CAPs that need adjustments to address the findings in a timely fashion. Metro Rail requested and the WMSC granted an extension for 2 other CAP proposals related to this audit. As those proposals were submitted later, our team is still reviewing those later submissions. Regarding the order we issued August 4th on automatic train control room inspection, maintenance, and cleaning, the WMSC reviewed Metro's latest revised CAP proposal last week. It is under review by our team. Overall, Metro Rail currently has 132 open WMSC CAPs. This is in addition to those CAPs that remain under development. The total number of CAPs reflects the areas where the WMSC has identified safety deficiencies as specified in the program standard. This includes Metro Rail not complying with its own requirements, personnel or assets exhibiting an unsafe condition, Metro Rail lacking a rule or procedure, or Metro Rail having an insufficient procedure. This also includes areas where the WMSC has made safety recommendations that Metro Rail is implementing corrective action plans to address. Metro Rail carrying out each of these corrective actions makes Metro Rail safer. Metro Rail's PTASP then specifies that the effectiveness of these mitigations are assessed and improved on through Metro Rail's SMS processes. Even after a CAP is closed, the WMSC also monitors Metro Rail's actions on an ongoing basis through our audit, inspection, and other oversight activities. Since the last public meeting, the WMSC has closed 5 CAPs. These CAPs include 2 CAPs addressing safety issues identified by our revenue vehicle or railcar audit issued last year. Cap C0135 included a process to ensure safety certification procedures are followed, including that only certifiable items lists approved by the Safety Certification Review Committee are used. Metrorail provided documentation this was being followed. This is in association with Metrorail's failure to follow this safety process regarding 6000 series railcar overhaul work, specifically including the 6000 series couplers. This is related to the train pull-aparts that occurred in fall 2020. The other railcar audit cap closed since your last meeting is C0141. This related to the implementation of a process for job plans and engineering case studies to ensure uniformity and to prevent conflicting direction. Work on this cap included the development of standardized formats and identification, and the review of existing plans as well. Other closed caps include C0153 regarding traction power training and coordination between engineering and operations departments, and C0061 regarding ensuring that Rail Operations Control Center rail traffic controllers actually participate in assigned ride-along field training to gain the necessary familiarization with the system. The fifth cap, related to hours of service, C0008, was closed as it was superseded by a similar cap Metrorail has developed to address a finding of this spring's rail operations audit. Metrorail is now working to implement that cap, C0120. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Rhodes? Okay, hearing none, we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is our regular status report on our oversight of the Silver Line Phase 2 safety certification process. Mr. Sahu, thank you for your work on this and other safety certification oversight activities. Would you please give this report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hart. As Ms. Samarasinha mentioned earlier, we have continued our work since our last public meeting, leading up to our concurrence on Metrorail's safety certification last Thursday. Due to our extensive work over the last 3 years, the frequent communication I, Ms. Samarasinha, Dr. Maya, and others have had with individuals at multiple levels of the Metrorail organization, and the WMSC's communication of items that we identified as we found them throughout this process, we were able to quickly work through an intensive but detailed review and spot check of thousands of pages of Metrorail documentation provided to us. This includes issuing our concurrence less than 24 hours after we received final necessary documentation from Metrorail. I appreciate the support of the WMSC team, including our subject matter experts, throughout this process to ensure that Metrorail addressed gaps in safety documentation and mitigations. We will continue to monitor Metrorail's and airport authorities' work on permanent mitigations that in coming months are planned to replace temporary mitigations in place today. This work includes monitoring of Metrorail's interim mitigations to ensure these are carried out. Examples of interim mitigations include equipment or areas that will not be used until safety issues are addressed, the stationing of personnel to assist with emergency evacuation if needed, and a fire watch when certain activities are carried out in specific locations. I would like to briefly provide an update on 2 other projects that are the subject of WMSC in-depth reviews of Metrorail's safety certification process, requiring the WMSC's concurrence before use in passenger service. First, the Potomac Yard Station. This is an infill station Metrorail is building on the blue and yellow lines in Alexandria, along with associated new tracking systems. Due to construction status, Metrorail planned to open the new tracks and utilize specific systems beginning earlier this month for trains to pass through the station without stopping until such time as station facilities are complete and the necessary safety certification steps for those facilities have been carried out. To provide for this activation of the new tracks and specific systems in passenger service, Metrorail developed a temporary use notice. The WMSC carefully reviewed this document in conjunction with other safety certification documentation and information and communicated specific questions and apparent gaps in safety documentation or mitigations to MetroRail. MetroRail and the WMSC worked collaboratively to ensure a timely resolution. This included ensuring that MetroRail had the necessary testing, documentation, and safety mitigations in place to address these safety items, which led to the WMSC concurring on November 4th that the revised temporary use notice was developed in accordance with and included necessary mitigations to address items specified by MetroRail's safety certification process. The WMSC will follow MetroRail's continued safety certification of the Potomac Yard project. MetroRail is required to receive the WMSC's concurrence with its safety certification process before opening the station to passengers. In accordance with our program standard, the WMSC issued a concurrence with MetroRail's safety certification process for this temporary use notice because this is a project that we have selected for in-depth review that requires such concurrence before MetroRail may place these assets into passenger use. A second example of a project selected for in-depth review is MetroRail's work on automatic train operation and automatic door operation. We will continue to oversee MetroRail's safety certification and related actions on this project. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Sahu. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Sahu? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we will now move on to safety event investigation reports that are being presented today. We will hear presentations on all of the reports and then consider a single motion on all of the reports that we are prepared to adopt. If any commissioner wishes to remove a report from the group that we will consider for adoption in a single vote, please indicate that at the end of the presentation on the report. We will start with investigations analyst Natalie Keyrose. Please present our first two reports.
Thank you, Chair Hart. The first two reports today relate to improper roadway worker protection in the area of King Street Station and Alexandria. In both of these events, the relevant trains were heading outbound toward where the blue and yellow lines diverged just south of the station. Investigation Whiskey 0184 covers an event that occurred on June 15th. In this event, the Advanced Mobile Flagger, or AMF, on the platform stopped briefing train operators that there were workers on the tracks ahead and that the train operators had to proceed at reduced speed. The AMF did not brief 3 trains. 2 trains were yellow line trains taking a different route. One of these trains was a blue line train that was traveling in the direction of the personnel on the blue line tracks. MetroRail rules require the AMF to brief all trains. Without a briefing directing them to travel at reduced speed, the train operator of that blue line train, train 402, proceeded toward the work crew at more than 50 miles per hour. This was a near miss. Upon seeing the work crew, the train operator sounded the horn, applied the brakes, and reported the event to the Rail Operations Control Center. The operator reported that they had not been briefed by an AMF. The crew was safely picked up by another train. The AMF reported they did not brief the train, and CCTV shows the AMF was sitting 35 feet from the required position at the time the trains passed. The AMF stated that they thought they had heard the roadway worker in charge tell them on the radio to stand down, so they stopped performing their duties. This is not an instruction that would be provided in these circumstances under MetroRail rules and procedures. Review of radio recordings did demonstrate there were unclear transmissions and radio interference during this event. The probable cause of this event was insufficient training and supervisory oversight of AMF activities. Contributing to this event were radio communication system deficiencies. Despite these identified deficiencies, MetroRail's Office of Radio Communications stated there were no abnormalities. The WMSC's communications audit issued on September 29th includes findings requiring corrective action plans to ensure that problems are properly identified and addressed. The second event on June 24th involved apparently conflicting instructions from an AMF and the Rail Operations Control Center. A yellow line train operator who was properly held at the platform by the AMF due to the work crew having foul time protection on the blue line departed the station when the rail traffic controller stated that they were providing a clear signal and switch alignment. The work crew was on the blue line, not the yellow line at the time. MetroRail procedures require an AMF to hold all trains at the platform if the work crew has foul time, regardless of the train's intended direction of travel. The investigation identified that contrary to Metrorail's roadway worker protection rules, Metrorail has been allowing trains to proceed if the route is expected to take the train away from the protected location. The AMF, who was following the written procedure, immediately reported to the ROCC that the train operator had left the station without being briefed. After the AMF reported this, the train operator acknowledged they had not been briefed by the AMF. The probable cause of this event was Metrorail's practical drift away from written roadway worker protection safety procedures. Metrorail is modifying the AMF rule as an interim measure while Metrorail's broader review of its RWP program proceeds. Metrorail also conducted safety briefings and distributed a safety bulletin on the importance of holding vehicle movement when personnel have foul time protection. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key Rose. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Key Rose?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lowby.
Ms. Kiro, this is yet another incident where we've had advanced mobile flaggers that were not in position, did not provide the right message. We had, I remember in the past, we had one case where an AMF was not in position, was on a train, and a second incident where the AMF was on the wrong platform. It seems to be that the AMF, this advanced mobile flagger, seems to be a single point of failure as far as roadway worker protection. And I note that you mentioned that Metrorail's evaluating AMF procedures, training, experience, and oversight requirements. Doesn't Metro realize the criticality of the role of the AMF? Why are we continuing to see issues with AMFs every time we review these accidents?
Well, the one AMF, these two reports was a good example of what to do. The one AMF did do the correct thing and the other AMF didn't. And they both had similar experience. They were both new AMFs, had only been on the job for a couple months. And the one AMF that did not do the correct thing was terminated. But Metrorail is looking into possibly other options besides using AMFs. They are exploring other options.
Well, it does seem to be a single point of failure. If an AMF makes a mistake, the people in the tunnel, the roadway workers are certainly put at risk. Are they considering any type of redundancy, checks and balances in order to make sure that operators know that there's work crews ahead of them in the tunnel?
Yeah, they are reviewing other options. Currently with the AMFs in place, the safety department is continuing to do compliance checks and audits on the AMF.
And I note that in the probable cause here, this phrase, probable cause of this event was Metrorail's practical drift away from written roadway worker protection safety procedures. Do you have any idea why that's happening? With all the roadway worker protection accidents that we've covered in the last couple of years, there's always at least 3 or 4, between 2 and 4 of those roadway worker protection issues, every time we meet. Why are they having this drift away from the written roadway worker protection procedures?
So in these two investigations, they both were at King Street where the blue and yellow lines diverge. And I think it's from the service standpoint, if the rail traffic controller believed that, they knew that the crew was on the blue line, that they felt it was safe to allow a yellow line train to continue to move. it is against the Metro Rail's procedures, and they did issue all of the notices to remind everyone, even if the train is not going to the line that the crew is on, that the train still needs to be held. And that can reduce the risk of making some type of mistake, or, thinking that a train is going, one direction and they end up going another, or even a rail traffic controller setting an incorrect route.
So this is an example of someone at Washington Metro setting aside the standard operating procedure and essentially deciding it's safe to ignore a procedure.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Lobby. It sounds like a good example of a situation that could use some revisiting of revising of that procedure to make it more realistic with reality. And in particular, I wonder if it's possible that we can learn something from our work with other mass transit properties on how they handle analogous situations and learn from them rather than try to reinvent that wheel. That wasn't necessarily a question, but if anybody has any comment on it, Ms. Samar Singh, for example, if you have any thoughts on whether we might learn from other mass transit properties on more effective ways to handle this so that it doesn't create a divergence between work as written and work as performed.
So in general, an industry best practice is to ensure that any standard operating procedures or rules are assembled and written after there is a concerted effort to receive input from the frontline employees or others who would implement such a rule. Right. And in regards to roadway worker protection, and this is something that we have discussed with you all as our commissioners over the last several years, as you have focused more and more on roadway worker protection related safety events. And one of the facts is that the roadway worker protection program at Metro Rail, which came about around 2010, has continued to be added to, even in the instances when Metro Rail has determined that a roadway worker protection rule was not implicated in a given safety event. So you have a patchwork of components being added to the roadway worker program, a roadway worker protection program, over and above and overcomplicating certain aspects, and then not properly addressing gaps that are left in other parts of the rule. And this has gone on for several years, almost a decade. And about a year and a half ago, it was the chief safety officer and her team that recognized that there needed to be a concerted reevaluation of the entire roadway worker protection program, and to bring it to industry practice and to make it compliant to the needs of the Metro Rail system, rather than adopting parts of rules and procedures that are part of other roadway worker protection programs, say at other transit agencies or even at the Federal Railroads Administration overseeing properties. So there is a concerted effort to make sure that the roadway worker protection program, as it exists today, is evolved into a program that meets the needs of the present Metro Rail operating characteristics. And so the answer to your question about looking at other transit properties is that Metro Rail is taking a very introspective view into their own rules and procedures that govern roadway worker protection, and questioning whether or not certain aspects fully address safety concerns, and if not, expanding on those parts. And then if there are redundant or obsolete aspects, they're taking a methodical approach in either setting those things aside or making a determination that they don't serve a purpose, and removing those from the array of roadway worker protection rules that make up the program. So that is their effort. The work is still ongoing, as Ms. Quiros pointed out, and the expectation in the projected timeline is that Metro Rail to have a new roadway worker protection program in place by December 2024.
Okay, so to Commissioner Lauby's point, some people are alert to the fact that there's a problem here and they're working on it as we speak.
They are, and they have been for the past 18 months or so. So
Excellent.
there's a parallel track on reimagining and evolving the existing roadway worker program, roadway worker protection program into a much more sophisticated program that meets Metro's needs. While that is ongoing, the current program with the issues that we are detecting here with safety events like this is still the program that Metro is required to comply with. So it's a parallel activity.
Thank you. Any further questions? Any further questions from you, Commissioner Lobby, or from any of the other commissioners?
Chair Hart, I'm often asking, when are they going to get this done? And now I thought it was going to be done sometime in 2023, but we're talking December 2024. Was that the date that you gave?
Yeah, Commissioner Lobby. So the rule revision will be taking place over the course of 2023. However, there are aspects in terms of the rollout, the implementation, and ensuring everybody is trained on the applicable rules, and that is what's going to also require time in order for Metro Rail to accomplish.
Well, I think 2.5 years to figure out roadway worker protection is ridiculous, frankly. I mean, this is an issue that puts their workers at risk, and I always hear they're working on it, but this is far too long to take to revise roadway worker protection rules. That's just the way I feel about this. Thank you.
Ms. Samar Singh, I would just ask you to have the staff take that into consideration in dealing with WMATA on this issue.
Absolutely.
Any more questions regarding this report from Ms. Quiroz? Okay, Ms. Quiroz, I believe the next report is yours as well, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. This investigation relates to improper train movement beyond the limits of a permissive block on June 23rd. In this event, Whiskey 0186, riders had been offloaded from a train due to a mechanical issue. Metrorail then cut out the trucks on one car with heavy brake odor. This allows the train to move without those friction brakes being applied. Due to the reduced braking functions and therefore the increased risk of collision, Metrorail rules require the train to then move only with employees on board and only under a permissive block. A permissive block is a set segment of track with no other vehicles on the roadway ahead. The rail controller had provided this block to the train operator to the end of the Metro Center station platform. However, the train operator continued beyond that block and did not request another block until after the front of the train was about 300 feet past McPherson Square Station. The rail controller then provided a permissive block to Farragut West Station, where the train operator was removed from service. The probable cause of this event was a lack of supervisory oversight to ensure that safety rules are consistently followed, including regarding permissive blocks and 100% radio repeat back of instructions. Contributing to this event were radio communication system deficiencies. Similar to the first report I presented, both the train operator and rail controller reported radio communication challenges during this event. Despite these identified deficiencies, Metrorail's Office of Radio Communications stated there were no abnormalities. The WMSC's communication audit issued on September 29th includes findings requiring corrective action plans to ensure that problems are properly identified and addressed. Metrorail committed to increasing observations of radio repeatback procedures. Metrorail issued a safety bulletin regarding ROCC post-event testing requirements and emphasized the importance to ROCC controllers of receiving word-for-word radio repeatbacks. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Quiroz. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Quiroz?
I have some questions, Chair Hart.
Commissioner Lobby, please.
This 100% repeat back of instructions, this is something that we've discussed several times before, and really 100% repeat back of instructions. One reason it's there is to mitigate issues that you have with radio communications, unclear radio communications. I'm kind of surprised that Washington Metro doesn't monitor these repeat backs at their control center on a regular basis. I mean, this is all over the radio. It's very easy for a supervisor to sit and listen to the radio communications and determine whether this is happening or not. And I know they try to re-educate, they try to give more training and emphasize the importance of this 100% repeat back, but where's the oversight here? Why isn't there somebody in the ROC that sits and listens to these radio communications and then has the ability to flag operators that are not following it? Is any of that done? Does anybody know?
I got that. So I know the ROC does that. I think each supervisor or manager, the Rail 2, Rail 3 are required to do audits of the rail traffic controllers, but that's kind of limited just to the controllers, nothing for the operator side. I'm not aware, and maybe Mr. Bruce Walker could correct me. I'm not aware of any type of observations or monitoring for the train operators from the Archer side. I know QA goes out there and listens occasionally, but the amount or the required amount of audits that are conducted a month are very low. I mean, 5 a month maybe for the ROC managers. So that's 5 controllers a month that they have to observe for different things, radio procedures, repeat backs, SOP compliance. So,
is there an issue of frequency congestion that makes readback not practical?
At times there could be, yes, sir.
Well, I just, every time I call up the airlines to make a reservation, they say this call may be recorded for quality control purposes. And I wish Metro would do a little of that quality control at the ROC to figure out, who's following procedures and doing the 100% readback and who's not, because we've had several accidents and we've had several close calls based on confusion about instructions issued over the radios where we haven't had this 100% repeat back. But to me, this is low-hanging fruit that could easily be supervised by Metro and basically corrected in short order rather than continuing to send out reminders that yes, you are required to have 100% repeat back of instructions.
Absolutely, and I know we've mentioned in past meetings that the ROC has a new QA department that's kind of under the ROC director, so that we'll take these concerns to the ROC director and see how we can resolve them and increase, because those would be the individuals that would have the time and access to recordings to monitor and check for compliance.
Well, I know everybody's busy, but this seems to be low-hanging fruit, something that could be fixed fairly quickly with some oversight. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Well, at the very least, I would suggest, excuse me, during the investigation process to find out in that moment, was there frequency congestion that made readback difficult?
Yes, in this investigation, yes, there was.
I've certainly been in many situations as a pilot where feedback is an excellent idea because humans make mistakes, and it's easy to think you hear what you to think that you hear what you thought you were going to hear as opposed to hearing what you really did hear. So that's why readback is so important. But on the other hand, I have been in situations where it's not practical. So I would like to at least find out, to Commissioner Lauby's point, to see whether it was not because they didn't want to do it, but because they couldn't do it. Any other questions for Mr. Keyrose at this point? Okay, in that case, moving on to the next report. Investigation Program Manager Adam Quigley will present the next report. Mr. Quigley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0187 relates to a serious injury at Chevrolet Station during the summer's long-term Orange Line shutdown. This summer's work included structural repairs and rebuilding platform edges at Orange Line stations east of Stadium Armory Station. In this case, the construction foreman stepped onto an unsecured platform edge and fell onto the roadway. The granite edge then fell on the construction contractor. The individual broke their leg. The investigation demonstrates that Metro Rail had not ensured that hazards identified in the job hazard analysis were properly mitigated or that sufficient safety plans were in place. Following this event, Metro Rail placed safety barriers and rope along the platform edge while granite edge pieces were being removed at the stations undergoing platform repairs. Metro Rail committed to more comprehensive work on hazard documentation and avoidance, and to ensure that the safety department and capital delivery department perform audits of contractor safety plans. Metro Rail has also committed to more robust guidelines for future projects requiring edge or ledge work. In addition, the contractor held a safety stand down and stopped work until adjustments were made. Regarding the timeline of this event, the injury occurred at approximately 11:23 p.m. A construction inspector notified the Rail Operations Control Center of the injury at approximately 11:49 p.m. after Prince George's County Fire and EMS had arrived at the station to assist the injured person. The roadway worker in charge for the entire shutdown area and a construction manager also later separately called the Rock to inform them of the event. Metro Rail did not report this accident level event involving a broken leg to the WMSC and FTA within 2 hours as required. Metro Rail reported this event nearly 9 hours after the event at 7:59 a.m. the following day. The WMSC investigations team continues to provide guidance to Metro Rail on the importance of complying with the WMSC program standard and federal regulation. Thank you. This completes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Quigley? Okay, hearing none, Mr. Quigley, would you please present the final report of the day?
Thank you, Gerard. This report relates to Metro Rail's response to a fatality on the red line between Brooklyn and Rhode Island Avenue stations on May 15th. A member of the public who had entered the tracks without permission was struck and killed by a train in the short tunnel section in this area. The train operator was not aware that they had struck a person, but reported to the Rail Operations Control Center just after 2 p.m. that an inner car barrier had come unattached on front of their train as they approached Rhode Island Avenue Station. This is the chain that connects between cars in the middle of a train as a safety measure to ensure people boarding the train only step through open doors and not through the gap between rail cars. At the station, the train operator informed the rail controller that the train may have struck something since the barrier was in 2 pieces. The rail controller allowed the train operator to continue in service and dispatched a rail car mechanic to meet the train at Gallery Place Station. Approximately 10 minutes after the train operator first reported the detached intercar barrier, the station manager at Rhode Island Avenue reported an emergency on the roadway. A member of the public had walked to the platform from the roadway and approached a Metro Rail employee on the platform. This person told the employee that a person they were with on the roadway had been struck by a train. The rail controller then directed train 105 at Rhode Island Avenue to hold at that location. A Rail Operations and Information Center employee in the Rock called for DC Fire and EMS response. DC Fire and EMS arrived at Rhode Island Avenue at approximately 2:28 p.m. The Metro Transit Police Department separately stated they established command at Brooklyn Station at approximately 2:34 p.m. Trains 105 and 111 were all floated for their operators to conduct track inspections. These initial inspections did not identify anything. Metro Rail then conducted another track inspection of the same area with a train operator and other personnel in the operating cab. At 2:46 p.m., approximately 45 minutes after the event occurred, an Archer supervisor on the subsequent train with the MTPD reported that person struck had been found on the roadway. The Rock controller improperly designated the rail supervisor as on-scene commander. Third rail power was de-energized, which was later verified by the rail supervisor. Warning strobe and alarm devices were not placed due to concerns about lightning in the area. DC Fire and EMS confirmed the person had died. Following this event, Metro Rail conducted an after-action review and distributed areas of improvement to ROC personnel regarding SOP 1A emergency response. Rail controllers also underwent refresher training on SOP 11 governing train collision procedures. Metro Rail committed to reviewing and updating procedures to ensure that track inspections from rail vehicles used to investigate unusual conditions are performed in a consistent manner. Metro Rail is also continuing work to implement corrective action plans related to the WMSC's audit of emergency management and fire and life safety programs issued earlier this year. Thank you. This completes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Quigley?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
Mr. Quigley, can you give us a little more information on looking at this part of the report that says due to concern of lightning in the area, on-scene WMATA personnel refused to place the warning strobe and alarm device. Is lightning a risk for that? And are they allowed to refuse to apply the WSAD?
I know Metro Rail reached out to the manufacturer and got a clear answer that it was appropriate and safe to use in lightning and storms. To answer the rest of your question, I would have to, I don't know if Bruce Walker or Mr. Walker's here or not.
Well, I just find it strange that they would refuse to use a safety device unless there's some urban legend that there's a problem with lightning storms. This is a new one for me.
Understood. Yes, for me as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a little bit confused about the geometry of things. I'm not sure I understand how a longitudinal chain between cars would be, how a broken longitudinal chain would be an indication of hitting somebody. I'm not sure I understand how that works.
Well, the lead car, the intercar barriers on the lead car are not attached, obviously, between two cars because it's the lead car. So it's usually just left hanging secured. So the operator noticed that it was in two pieces, still kind of secured to some extent, but it was broken in two pieces. And that's why they thought they had made contact with something like a bird. I believe a bird was initially reported over the radio, possibly hitting a bird.
A bird, you say?
Yes, a bird. Yes.
Okay, I guess I'd have to see it to understand it because that doesn't make sense to me just visually. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Quigley from the commissioners?
One more question, Chair Hart. Did
Yes.
they figure out how the individuals got on the roadway?
Yeah, they entered they went beyond the end gate at the platform. So they were in a platform and just went beyond the end gate and onto the roadway.
Was there a reason they were doing that? Just wanted to go in a tunnel or what?
I do not have an answer for that, sir. No, we don't know why they were doing it.
From the end gate at the end of the station platform?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
This is not something you would do accidentally. In other words, it was intentional to enter the roadway.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Commissioner Lobby. Any other questions from other commissioners for Mr. Quigley? Okay, that completes the 5 reports we've gotten. Now I'm going to see if there's a motion to adopt the investigation reports, all 5 of them together that have just been presented, or does anybody want to separate any of the reports?
They be adopted together.
Okay, so is there a motion to adopt the investigation reports together? Is that a motion? Can I consider that as a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, Commissioner Rush moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, 2 seconds. That's even better. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Chair Hart, the vote is 6-0 and the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. I am going to look into having some discussions offline on some of these questions that are being raised, because I agree with Commissioner Lobby that I'm concerned that things aren't happening in a timely manner, or we're seeing the same things over and over again. We're not seeing enough progress of any forward motion on this to reflect continuous improvement. So we will take some of that up offline and have some further discussion about it. Now, with that said, thank you, Mr. Smith, for the count on the motion. We will now move on to resolutions and other actions. First, I would like to report that our commissioners approved our draft budget and work plan for fiscal year 2024 via written vote. This draft was then transmitted to DC, Maryland, and Virginia on time in accordance with our jurisdictional funding agreement. This assists the jurisdictions in their budget process and ensures that our team is prepared to most effectively continue to build on the work that we are continuing day in and day out. Next, we will consider the Metro Rail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. This plan lays out Metro Rail's commitment to a strong safety culture that reaches everyone from the frontline workers and supervisors to executive management. Metro Rail is required to review and update this plan at least annually. The WMSC oversees Metro Rail's implementation of the plan. Ms. Samar Singha, do you have anything else to add to that description of the plan?
Yes, I do, Chair Hart. Thank you. So this is Metro Rail's second annual revision to its agency safety plan. The initial version was effective almost 2 years ago in December 2020. This change and the annual revisions of the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, PTASP, are required to meet WMSC requirements and federal regulations. The PTASP is required to include a safety management system or SMS approach. The objectives here are safety, accountability, increased use of data, and a clear commitment that every employee, from the frontline worker to the supervisor to managers and to executive leaders, are accountable for upholding the commitments to safety. This includes clear direction on how each person at Metro Rail can meet this safety responsibility. It takes training, avenues for reporting safety issues, and communication to keep everyone up to date on how these reports are being used to proactively improve safety. This also means that there must be an agency-wide safety objective. Senior management must be committed to continually improving safety, and that there must be specific methods, processes, and structures in place to meet safety goals. It also means that WMATA must continually evaluate the effectiveness of its mitigations, support the identification of new hazards, and determine the need for new controls. This requires training, communications, and other actions to create a positive safety culture at all levels of the workforce. The goal is to be proactive by identifying and addressing issues before an accident occurs, and by ensuring continuous learning and open dialogue. The WMSC has reviewed and provided feedback on multiple drafts of WMATA's Agency Safety Plan revision, leading up to this final version that is before you today. WMSC staff reviewed Metro Rail's final draft for compliance with our program standard and federal regulation, and in accordance with our program standard, we transmitted conditional approval to Metro Rail prior to the WMATA board approving this PTASP on September 22nd. Some of Metro Rail's revisions this year include items required by the bipartisan infrastructure law, such as the creation of a labor management safety committee, expanded employee safety training, items related to transit worker assaults. In addition, the plan includes updates to planned SMS implementation timelines and tasks to progress these items over the upcoming year. Generally, the PTAS specifies Metro Rail safety commitments, including specific standards Metro Rail must meet. Metro Rail's other documented policies and procedures are implemented under the umbrella of the PTAS, this high-level document. As the safety oversight agency for Metro Rail, the WMSC must approve the WMSC must approve Metro Rail's PTAS revision before it can be implemented. A vote to approve the plan today means that the commissioners concur with the WMSC staff assessment that the plan complies with federal regulations and law. The plan has a sufficiently explicit process for safety risk management with adequate means of risk mitigation. that the plan includes a process and timeline for annual reviews and updates, that the plan includes a comprehensive staff training program for operations personnel directly responsible for safety, that the plan identifies an adequately trained safety officer who reports to the general manager, that it includes adequate methods to be actually executed, and that the plan has been approved by the WMATA Board of Directors. The WMATA Board of Directors approved the plan on September 22nd, and the plan has been signed by the accountable executive, the general manager. As you mentioned, Chair Hart, the WMSC oversees Metrorail's implementation of its PTASP. This is a basic element of our program standard and a basic responsibility specified in the WMSC Compact, that when Metrorail makes safety commitments, we expect Metrorail to follow those commitments. If the WMSC identifies that Metrorail is not following its safety requirements, then we take the necessary action to require Metrorail to correct that safety issue. Metrorail has committed to proactively mitigating risks governed by the principles of understanding the safety risk it faces, proactively working to prevent occurrence of these risks utilizing lessons learned, and by encouraging all Metrorail employees to transparently voice safety concerns without fear of reprisal. The WMSC will continue to oversee this implementation and will continue to identify areas where Metrorail can and must get better. That completes my updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samar Singh, for that explanation. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Samar Singh? I have a timing question. I'm a little bit confused because I think early in your report, you said this was the previous time we did this was almost 2 years ago, but yet this was an annual activity. I'm a little bit confused on the timing.
To be specific, so the very first time, and this too was arising out of federal regulations that required there to be a public transportation agency plan for each rail transit agency by December 31st, 2020. That was the first time this was required, and that was the first deadline. And that is what we were referring to by saying that the first of this kind was approved by us for it to be in effect by the deadline of December 2020. Since then, this commission has approved a subsequent version last year prior to it going into effect in 2022. And now what is before you all is for you to vote on approving the version that's being presented that will go into effect at the start of January 2023.
Okay, that's helpful. I misunderstood. I thought you said this was the first vote that we were taking on it. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Samar Singh? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt Resolution R 2022-04 accepting Metrorail's PTASP revision? Should we attach a year to that PTASP revision for what would we say for the year?
So moved.
2023? What should we say for that, Ms. Samar Singh?
I'm sorry, Chair Hart, I did not follow your question.
I'm trying to be specific for the purposes of noting what we're doing here. A motion to adopt Resolution 2022-04 is to accept the PTASP revision for what year? What year did we label that with? 2023?
2023, which will go into effect the 1st of January 2023. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So all those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Or I'm sorry, we don't have a motion yet.
You need a second.
Okay, the second for the motion. Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Rush.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
The vote is 6-0, Chair Hart, and the motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. We have one further item to consider. As I mentioned earlier in this meeting, we greatly appreciate Greg Hull's service to the region as a WMSC commissioner and as vice chair. We now need to fill that vice chair vacancy created by his departure. Are there any nominations for who can replace Mr. Hull as vice chair?
Yes, Chair Hart. I would like to nominate Commissioner Michael Rush.
Commissioner Rush, thank you. Is there a second to that nomination?
Second.
Okay, so Commissioner Bob seconds the nomination. Mr. Rush, do you accept that nomination?
I accept the nomination. Thank you, Chair Hart.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, the nominations are closed, and being the only nominee, Commissioner Rush is hereby elected as Vice Chairman. Congratulations, Commissioner Rush.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Chair Hart.
Thank you. That completes our business for today. As a reminder, you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. Before we leave this meeting, I would like to wish our CEO, Dr. David Meyer, a speedy return to work. I would also like to thank former Commissioner Hull once again for his previous service. I would also like to congratulate the WMAA and the WMATA WMATA, as well as Dr. Meyer and his team for their hard work leading to today's opening of the Silver Line Phase 2. I would like to thank Dr. Meyer, Ms. Samarasinha, and their team for their preparation for this remote meeting. And I would like, last but not least, to thank the commissioners for their extensive engagement in this process, including at the meeting itself. Also, as always, I would like to thank the members of the public for attending this meeting. We look forward to seeing you again next month at our next public meeting, which we expect to hold on December 13th, 2022. Is there any further business for this meeting? Hearing none, the meeting is hereby adjourned.